What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about other factors involving the markets and the levels to watch for, what you should be watching for as time goes on. But just remember that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Weeble link. If you deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 free stocks. If you deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total, and deposit $25,000 or more and you're guaranteed 75. The offer ends in just 11 days. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. So, like I said in my video from yesterday, the market's looking a little bit more bullish so far as we're holding above our key supports. Now, despite the fact that we are technically uptrending, I do want to warn you guys to be a little bit careful at these levels because the market's at these all-time highs, and historically it is a tough resistance, at least for SPY near these all-time highs. So yes, we look bullish. I do think the market's going to try to push higher. I think that there is more potential, but I'm just saying to be a little bit careful because we're at all-time highs and the resistance is going to get tougher the higher we go. Now, I'm going to break down more details about these charts in a couple of minutes, but I first want to talk about some data because we do have some stuff coming out very soon. Now, tomorrow is going to be Monday, October 21st, 2024. Please remember that at 8:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time before the market opens, we have Logan from the Fed giving a speech. Then we have the 3 and 6 month bill auctions coming out. Then finally at 1 p.m. we have Kashkari giving a speech. Now, when Kashkari gives a speech at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, just know this. The second to last time he spoke, the market dipped because he was saying that he was concerned about employment in America, and unemployment basically spiking because of interest rates. And then later on, he basically was saying that he's very optimistic about the economy. It's very resilient. And then the last time this guy spoke, the market pumped. So it could go either way depending on what he says. But so far, the market does look like it's going to try to push at least in the daytime. So we'll see what happens once he gives his speech. But that's pretty much it, at least for our economic data. For Tuesday, it's very minor. We just have like manufacturing numbers. There's not much coming out for Wednesday. And Thursday and Friday is when we have unemployment numbers and more important stuff. But for now, just for Monday, just know it's very, very insignificant. There's nothing too crazy except for like a couple of Fed speeches. And that's pretty much it for the data. Now, for earnings, this is another story. I just want to remind you all that for Monday, it's going to be very quiet. We just have a couple of bank earnings, nothing too crazy. And then after the market closes, we have SAP and a few others, Logitech. Everything is quite minor for Monday. For Tuesday, we have Verizon, GM, 3M, and a few more, but nothing too crazy, guys. Nothing too crazy coming out for Tuesday. I do want to say Verizon is going to be important for communications, but that's pretty much it. There's nothing else that's too crazy for Tuesday. Wednesday, however, is going to be a very, very big day for earnings, the biggest day of the week because we have Boeing, AT&T, and Coca-Cola announcing their earnings in the morning. Then we have the notorious Tesla stock and IBM announcing their earnings after the market ends up closing. So Tesla's going to be a big one for the EV sector. Get ready, guys. Expect some high volatility. Now, besides that, the market thinks there's about a 90.4% chance right now we get a 50 basis point cut by the Fed, and about a 25 basis point cut has about a 9.6% probability. On top of this, I want to mention that the fear and greed index is currently at extreme greed. We're at extremes because right now those are what's making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is also at these extremes right now as we're starting to see a lot more buyers stepping in. We're holding really well above our moving averages. And on top of this, the puts and call option ratio is continuing to fall as we're starting to see more and more of these calls being bought, which is shifting the ratio downwards. That's why we're seeing that. And besides that, the VIX is still on a bit of a downtrend. So that's what I'm seeing, at least for the time being. The market's at these extremes, which is why you should be very careful. However, that does not mean the market is done. So how would I describe this market? How would I go over these levels? That's what I want to focus on. So when it comes to SPY, just know this. We have this rising wedge that's still present, and rising wedges, they could be bullish initially, but they will lead to something bearish later on. What do I mean by that? Look at the trend. It's been going up, 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 and this rising wedge is continuing to pump, and there's no sign that we are rejecting. There is a triple bearish divergence developing, which tends to lead to downside, but there's no sign of rejection yet, so don't turn to bearish. I want to make that very, very clear. As of right now, we're bullish. So if you want to turn bearish on SPY, okay, going into tomorrow, you want to see it lose 582. If 582 fails us on SPY, we're going to be coming back down to about 579 to 578. The 578 is going to be where the 50 EMA is by tomorrow, and 579 was our support from a couple of days ago. That 578 to 579 area is going to be key for us. If that zone fails us, this is going to be looking for a much bigger dump all the way down towards the mid 570s, and that's how you're going to turn more bearish. If you're bullish on SPY, you want to see this continuing to push. You want to see it test 586. If that breaks, every dollar amount is going to be the next resistance, 587, 588. And if we get above that, I think the 590 area is coming very soon. What do I think the chart is going to do? As of right now for Monday morning, as long as there's no major bad news, the odds are favoring that we're going to see some more upside. This chart's looking very strong so far. You could also interpret this as kind of like a cup and handle like structure. So I think it's going to be pushing very, very nicely in the morning to 586. Maybe try to go a little higher, and then we'll see if we get a rejection, right? There was a time we pushed up to about 585 and rejected. We pushed up to 586 and rejected. We pushed up a little higher, so we'll see if we get a little rejection as well. But I think for the time being, look for a little bit more upside in the morning, and then we'll see if we get that rejection off 580, maybe above all-time highs, like 587 could be coming before we see that rejection. Just be careful, guys. I want to give you guys a heads up about that little push, and then the dip is very probable. As far as ES goes, the chart remains bullish just like that of SPY because we're holding our key supports very nicely as well. We're riding our 20 EMA nicely. We're riding it, holding it very, very well. If you're bearish on ES, you want to see it lose 58.88. If we lose that, we're looking for a dip back down to this imbalance to the 50 EMA at 58.62. That's going to turn us more bearish. If we're bullish, you want to see it break past 59.25. If that breaks, we're looking for a bigger push for 59.40. My gut tells me that this is a nice accumulation, once again looking like a cup and handle. And this is going to try to blast off for these all-time highs all over again. 59.30 plus could be coming, but then don't be too comfortable up here. Even though it does look more bullish, it might try to push for all-time highs. There's still a risk of it dipping back down later on during the day. There's a risk of that because we're going to be approaching a new resistance. So for now, the chart favors upside. It looks like it wants to go higher. It looks like it's going to be testing this high right here, so a little bit more upside, but then be careful at these highs because it's going to be a tough resistance. For Nvda, we're kind of consolidating right now. We saw so much upside after their big AI event, and now we're reaching a point where we're just kind of consolidating. So if you're bearish on Nvidia, just hypothetically, you want to see us lose 136. If 136 fails on Nvidia, we're going to be dipping all the way down to 133. If we're bullish, you want to see it hold above 138. If we hold above the 138s, we have potential to go back up to about 140. As of right now, I think it's going to consolidate a lot. There might be a little pop coming closer to 140 before it continues to consolidate. So that's all I'm seeing for the time being. I do want to mention that for Nvidia, the last time we hit 137 to 140, we did see a rejection. So be careful at this tough resistance. It might not be ready to reject now, so it might kind of pop a bit, then it could be dipping back down. So watch and see that as the most likely move for Nvidia, a little pop and drop. Might consolidate around 138 before it tries to push closer to 140 before it dips back down. That's the most likely case in my personal opinion. For Bitcoin looks more bullish as we're holding our 20 EMA very, very nicely. We're riding this very well. If we lose 68,000, we're looking for a dip back down towards the 67,000 area, close to where this imbalance happens to be. And for bullish, you want to see it break past 69,000. If that breaks, we're looking for a bigger push closer to 69,500. So as of right now, we're holding our 20 EMA very, very nicely, and there's a good chance that Bitcoin's going to try to push. As long as it does not lose 60,026, we are favoring 69,000 plus on Bitcoin. We could get closer to 70,000 area. As of right now, Bitcoin looks more bullish. I want to make that very, very clear. So Bitcoin's doing a good job at holding its key supports, and this is favoring upside. How about the big one, Tesla stock? What is Tesla doing? So we're consolidating very, very slowly. We're not really doing much because we're waiting for a big move. We're getting very tight right now because there's going to be a big expansion in volatility. Why is that? Because earnings is coming up very soon on Wednesday. So what is Tesla going to do? It's going to likely continue to consolidate. I think it might try to push a little higher, try to get back up to 222.5, and then maybe even 225 for a little bit of a push. But I still think it might consolidate for a little bit longer. Look for some upside, a lot of choppy price action, maybe 225 is our target. And then even if it does push a little higher, do not turn overly bullish, overly bearish, because it's going to depend on earnings. So that's what I'm saying. There is some life that's developing right here. Volume is very slow, but I do think volume is going to start surging as soon as tomorrow. And we might be looking for a little attempt for 222.5, if not 225 by tomorrow, if not a little higher. And then we'll see how it goes. As long as we don't lose 219, we're going to favor upside. If 219 fails, let's look for 217 and 215. But so far, Tesla's favoring that wants to go up to 222, then 225 is the most likely cases, and then consolidate for a little bit. For NQ has a very, very nice looking structure. We're actually holding supports very nicely. If we end up losing 20,428, we're looking for 20,378 as our next support down here. As long as we hold that, though, there's going to be a good chance that it tries to go up to about 20,550. So I think we're going to be looking for a push on NQ, but I do want to tell you guys one concern about it. We had a high up here at 20,680. We came down, made a lower high, and then we came down. So if we push and we make a lower high and reject, that's going to be a sign of weakness. If we break the high here, we're going to turn more bullish, and this is going to be trying to approach these highs. So it depends on, can we break 20,600 or not. My guts tells me we're going to be going up to about 20,550 and then watch and see. So it's going to go a little higher than watch and see if we reject or not. If we make a lower high, it's going to be a sign of weakness on NQ compared to these highs. If we break the high, we turn more bullish. As of right now, look for a pop, and then we'll see how well it holds up. For Coinbase, not Coinbase, the QQQ, excuse me, we look more bullish as we're holding supports. Look at 492 as our supports. If that fails us, I'm sorry, 493 is our support. If that fails us, we're going back down to about 490.5. And if that fails us, we're looking for a dip back down to about 488. We also have this resistance up here around this 498 area. My gut is telling me, because we have a PPO crossover, this is going to attempt to go higher for 496 plus for a little bit of upside. You see some upside on the QQQ. Now, just like NQ, remember there's a high here. We came down at a lower high, then we came down. So will we manage to break past 497? If we break that, we're bullish. If we come short and rejects, that's going to be a sign of weakness. I think we're going to be pushing to at least 496, but we'll see if 497 breaks or not. As of right now, we do look a little bit more bullish, but we'll see if we could break this high or not, because once again, if it doesn't, there could be a downtrend that's starting. But nonetheless, it looks bullish. For Aapl has a nice accumulation structure, and we look more bullish. Let me just say that if we manage to break past 236, we're looking for a bigger pump all the way up closer to about 238. And if we end up rejecting and losing 235, there is a risk of Aapl dipping lower, close to our 20 EMA to at least the 232 area. So I do want to call out to be a little careful of Aapl, because even if we're forming a nice accumulation, the issue is every time we hit 240, historically 237 to 240, this has rejected, okay? So we hit 237 again, we touched it, kind of rejected, we touched it again. Are we about to see a little bit of a dip here, which could slow the market down? So just be careful. I do think the market may start off with a little bit of a push. Even Aapl could start off with that push. But later on during the day, if it does not break 237, there's a risk of it coming back down to fill this gap, getting closer to the 232 area. So just be mindful of that, guys. There is some risk in Aapl, especially at these high levels. So be very, very mindful of that. Anyways, for the rest of the tickers I have in store, we're going to go over these a little bit quickly. So for Netflix, we look bullish. We're doing a good job at holding up. I want to mention that we're up 11.09% for the day, at least from Friday, and we're still looking very nice after earnings came out. The main thing about Netflix is the fact that they have some strong guidance, especially for Q4. That's what got investors very, very excited, especially because of the boxing match that they're going to be streaming, I think, next month. Not to mention, they also have some NFL games they're going to be streaming. Then they have a new season of their show Squid Game coming out. So very cool stuff. Very, very cool stuff. So I think that Netflix is bullish. And I think with this much momentum, it could go a little higher, but just be careful because it's already run so far so fast. So I think we could be looking for 770 as a potential target, maybe a little bit higher. Then we'll see how it reacts to that. 770 to 775 could be coming, and then we'll see how it reacts. For CELH, for those who are interested, this is once again making lower highs. I think it's going to attempt to go a little higher right here towards the 35 area, and then we'll see if it rejects or not. So look for a little bit more upside looking at the 4-hour, and then we'll see how it reacts to resistance, but I do see potential for 35. For Palantir, we look more bullish as we're holding support very nicely, and I did mention this in my previous video. If we lose 42.38, we're looking for 41.37. If we start pushing higher, we're looking for basically 43.31 as our target. Palantir looks a little bit more bullish in my opinion, so it favors 43.31. For Supermicro, we have a double top leg structure. If we don't break past 47.74, there's a risk of it coming down to 46.63. I think that this might dip a little bit more. It might kind of pop a bit and dip, and I think there's a risk of it coming down to 46.63, if not a little bit lower, all the way down to 45. So just be mindful of that. Supermicro has some risks of downside. Rivian is kind of consolidating. It might react to Tesla, but we'll have to watch as it's getting sandwiched between $10 as support and then 10.2 as resistance. So I might just go back and forth in that range, and we'll see what it does after that. For other factors out there, we have SoFi. SoFi is trying to hold its 20 EMA. We have 9.82 as our resistance. If that breaks, we're looking for basically 10.3. If we end up losing 10, we're looking for 9.8 as our target. This looks more bullish, so we're basically looking for 10.3 as our potential target. So the 4-hour looks more bullish on SoFi. I think there's a good chance we try to push, and we could be looking for basically 10.3 as our next target. For the IWM, we have a double top leg structure. If we end up losing basically this 225 area, we're looking for a dip back down towards 224.5. If we hold above 225, we're looking for a push, but we have a double top, so I think there's a risk of 224.5 coming. So the IWM might slow down just a bit, guys, so just be mindful of that. But that does not mean that it's bearish. It's due for a little bit of a slowdown off this double top. It's also because we hit this resistance near 227. Every time we hit that, we did reject over the last month. And then on top of that, we pumped so much. Okay, we pumped so much. We went from 214 all the way up to about 227 a share. So it is due for a little bit of a dip. Might be coming back down to this EMA at 224.5 or a little lower before it tries to bounce again. For AMD, we look more bearish. Now, we need to try to hold above 157. If we don't hold above 157, I think AMD might be dipping closer to about 155 flat. And if that fails us, I think we come all the way down to either 151 to 150. 150 is likely coming if we lose 155, so I do see some bearish potential. For ARM, we had a high, we came down at a lower high. We need to reclaim and break past 157 to turn bullish. If we can't do that, we're looking for 150 as our target. It also might dip a little bit with chips, so be very mindful of that. There's a risk of some downside. Coinbase looks more bullish as we're breaking out so far. There's no sign of it rejecting. If we were to lose, hypothetically, basically 218, we're looking for 212 as our target. As long as we're above 218, we do favor a bigger push for this imbalance, taking us up to the next resistance. Look for 220 and then 224 is our targets. We look more bullish on coin for now, but just be careful at those resistance levels. For Amazon looks like it's starting to reject just a bit. I do call this out because we had some tough resistance at 190. When you look at the chart like this, you guys can see it's making a potential lower high. So to be bullish, you want to hold above 190. If we can't do that, we're at risk of coming down to about 187 in this range here. So I think we might be dipping back down to 187, and there's a good chance it dips a little bit, and we'll see how it reacts to that. Meta is looking a little bit weaker. We had a high up here. We came down at a lower high. Now we're dipping. So if we can't reclaim 581, we're going to likely be dipping all the way down to about the 570 range. I also say that because we're making lower highs right here. So some tech stocks are showing some weakness. That may lead to a little bit of a dip. Now this makes things a little bit more risky for the QQQ, even though it could push a little bit higher. Be careful at resistance because I'm seeing some weakness in tech. Microsoft is just consolidating. It looks a little bit more in favor of that. It wants to push a little higher towards about the 418.5 to 419 target. 420 target. If we reject off 420, we're looking for a dip back down towards the support. I think we're just going to consolidate for now, but I do want to say there's a risk of it getting some kind of rejection. Just be mindful of that. As far as Google goes, we're making lower highs. So we had a high up here, we came down, but a lower high came down, but a lower high came down. So if we break past 165, we're looking for a push back up towards this 167 area. If we reject here, we're at risk of coming down to this imbalance. My gut tells me it's going to be hitting the just under 166 area, then reject, and I think it might be coming down to 163 soon. So I do see some risks of that slowdown. DJT pushed very nicely towards the 34 area. Now it's slowing down. Look for a test of 28.75. If that does not hold, we're coming back down to 26. I see a risk of some downside in my opinion. For the VIX, we're actually on a bit of a downtrend right here. We have this imbalance down here to fill. It could dip a little bit more, but we'll see if we get a bounce later on. For now, the VIX looks bearish, but just know we still have this big gap to fill above, and the VIX is still technically the VIX was forming a bullish divergence despite this dip. So we'll see if the VIX gets a bounce or not later on. But for the time being, the VIX is still bearish, which means the market may go a little bit higher. Just know that in the future, whether it's in November or early next year, the VIX is going to get a big spike, most likely back close to 40, because the market is going to get a big rug pull. Either in November, closer to November, the closer we get to the election / after the election, or even early next year, there's going to be a big rug pull in the markets, in my opinion. For the 10-year, we're going to likely dip towards 4.01. We'll see what the Fed speakers say, which affect us. And the dollar is also dipping. This is technically still bullish for the markets. So we're just waiting to see how things go. So overall, my view is this. The market is bullish. It's going to try to push a little bit higher, but just be careful. You have to be very, very careful because even if the market tries to push higher, we're approaching some tough resistance areas around those highs. So at the resistance, you want to be very, very careful. and just be very mindful of how the risks are, developing. So that being said, I want to thank you all so much for listening. I hope you guys have a great day. It is football Sunday, so please enjoy your day, night, and evening. Enjoy some football and enjoy life and for whatever the weekend has left to offer, basically. And I just want to thank you all for listening again. So I'll be back tomorrow before the market opens for another update. Until then, stay safe, guys, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you for listening, and peace out.